Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Premiership Quarter. Today, I'm going to be doing my round 8 review of Under the Lights. I'm going to be going through the Thursday night game between Adelaide and Port Adelaide, the Friday night game between Carlton and Collingwood, which is an absolute ripper, as well as the Saturday night game, the slugfest between Melbourne and Geelong. I'm going to be going through what I thought the game was won and lost, who performed well and who didn't. And with that being said, let's get straight into the video. To start with, on Thursday night, it was the showdown between Adelaide and Port Adelaide. And it was a pretty interesting match. It was two teams that haven't been at their absolute best this year. Adelaide obviously have struggled quite early on in the season, but have been able to regain a bit of form. And then you have Port Adelaide, who have essentially done what they've done in the last few years, where they've sort of beat up or at least beat the teams who are below them or just around their area, but have struggled to beat the better teams. Port Adelaide obviously weren't with Aliir or Sam Pepper for this game, and they tried to get Rosie back into it and hope that he was fit. Fortunately, they were wrong. He wasn't fully fit, and it was a bit of a tough decision. Unfortunately, it was wrong, and he's now going to be out for a few weeks with a hamstring injury. But they sort of were on the back foot to start the game. I did tip Adelaide because I thought this would happen, and it did. And Adelaide was just able to capitalize on any mistake that Port Adelaide made, especially early on. I think it was 5-1 at some time during the first quarter. I'm not sure if it finished that way. But anytime Port Adelaide weren't able to capitalize going forward, Adelaide rebounded really, really well. And I think a lot of that was on the back of their tools. I was really surprised looking at their lineup, how tall they were defensively. You've got Jordan Butts, who's 198. You've got Mark Keane, who's 194, as their real two main pillars. But you've also got Josh Worrell, who's like 195 himself. You've got Dan Curtin, who's about the same. You've got Mitch Hinge, who's 190 as well. And then Michelini as well is also 190. So while Mitch Hinge is a bit of a winger and halfback, that's almost 6 defenders who are over the height of 190 centimetres. And they didn't have Brody Smith, so a bit of their transition game and their ball movement that they could have had off of halfback wasn't there. And they decided to go for a full intercepted backline, essentially. And it worked. Dixon wasn't at his best as he was last week. And Georgiades and Marshall both struggled to get into the game. And so it was a good coaching change, I suppose, from Matthew Nicks, and it really, really worked. They're able to get the ball going, and they're able to capitalize a lot out the back, getting over Port's press that they try to get really, really high on. For Adelaide as well, Jake Saligo has continued his breakout season. He's been really, really good over the last probably 5-6 weeks, to say the least. He's really provided that spark in the middle, that energy, that breakout pace that they haven't had with the players like Laird, Dawson, Crouch, and probably Berry as well. They just haven't had that pace to be able to break through a couple tackles, and Saligo has provided that. I also think up forward, Darcy Fogarty has been a lot better than he has started this year. He's been really, really struggling, where a few people wanted him to break out into that real lockdown position, with potentially Taylor Walker taking a step back, which he has. But when his heights were so high, obviously he's going to take a little bit of a step back. But he was much better. He was more physical, and that provided a bit of a challenge for Port Adelaide's defence to handle, especially early. I think he kicked the first 2 goals of the game. And that was really, really good start for Adelaide, which is what they needed. And then for Port, it was a bit of a, if they can't get it defensively and their offense just isn't able to hit their strides as they were last week. Part of that's due to accuracy, yes, but if they aren't able to get the results and their press essentially without Aliir is breaking down, they're really, really going to struggle. They rely on pushing the opponents back into their defensive 50, and if it does get over the back, the teams are always going to score. And so I think it was a bit of a poor coaching performance from Ken Hinkley, not being able to change that, not wanting to change it without your best key defender in Aliir, and not understanding that Adelaide early on were able to get it. They lifted elsewhere. Their forward line was a bit stronger, and they weren't allowing it to get out as easily as it was in the first, which is how they got back into the game, but then it broke in the fourth quarter. Now, moving on to the Friday night game between Carlton and Collingwood, and this was an absolutely awesome game to watch. Both teams are at their top end of the ladder, I'd call it. They're really challenging for the 8. I think Collingwood now are 9th on the ladder, so they're able to get back from their poor start to the year and really, really challenge now and potentially push for top 4 again. But for Carlton, defensively, Wiedering hasn't been at his best this year, and they've allowed a lot more scores with that. So I think Zach Williams has really, really struggled, especially in this game defensively. But that's also going to be without the support of McGovern and Sard in the air, because he's not your first choice defender in one-on-one situations. And so Elliott and Hill and Schultz were able to get the better of him in most of those situations. He was very nervous, you could say, because he was giving away free kicks and he wasn't expected to win any of them after the first one he lost. He sort of got into his head and he wasn't able to win any more battles. However, another small defender for Carlton in Nick Newman probably had his best game of the year without Sard. He really picked it up. He had over 30 touches. I think he had 10 marks, and he was providing that sort of ball movement and that kicking ability off of halfback that they haven't necessarily had. Williams wasn't able to do it because he was tasked more defensively, and I thought Newman picked up his game to be able to take on that challenge, and he did it pretty well. Outside of that, I think forward-wise for Carlton, Mackay was very, very good. He was able to beat Frampton in a few one-on-ones, but outside of that, Curnow was relatively well held by Moore. He was up the ground a bit more, and that's where I was able to get a bit more damage. But at times, he didn't look like he had the energy to be able to apply pressure for a forward because the ball was on the ground a fair bit. He wasn't marking them as much as he normally does. And so I think his ground ball game in those times when he isn't marking the ball probably needs a bit of work. He might look a bit uninterested when doing that, but it's because he's unfamiliar with not necessarily always taking the mark. And I think his ground ball game does need a bit of improvement in that. To say he does look uninterested is a bit of an unfair criticism, I think. And then elsewhere, they just need to get it to others. Look at Always as a lead-up target more so. Look at Fogarty potentially, hoping to get Motlop back because Fantasia just has not hit the ground at all. He's really struggled so far this year. And so there's a lot of improvement for Carlton, absolutely. But I think Collingwood also defended really, really well. There was no De Goey or Mitchell for Collingwood in the midfield, and that meant Nick Dacos had to stand up a lot more. It meant Jack Crisp probably had to play a bit more time there. And they also lost Beau McCreary in the second quarter due to concussion. So they had to get Lockie Sullivan into the game as a debutant. I still don't like having them as a sub, the debutant, but not much you can do about it. And he has joined the First Kick, First Goal club. I think he looked not too bad. But going back to Collingwood's midfield, they were a lot better after probably first half of the first quarter. They picked up their game because I think Carlton were able to get a bit of an advantage early. I think it was when Pinnet had an injury to his nose where I think Collingwood won 6 of the next 7 centre clearances or just clearances in general. So they were able to get their mids going. And once Pinnet got it back on the ground, they weren't able to get obliterated like they had been earlier in the game, which is really important. Nick Dacos had, I think, over 30 touches and 2 goals. Easily best on ground. He was absolutely excellent. Kicked the match-winning goal as well. And it was great to see his old man finally celebrating a goal. And he gave it to the Carlton fans in the end as well with a big which is pretty funny. But outside of that, they're going to be rolling a couple of injuries and suspensions now. Lockie Schultz punched someone in the back of the head and he got a week. And I think Myercheck's now also hurt his hamstring, so he's going to be missing. So it's going to be a really crucial time for Collingwood, hoping they get the win against West Coast, because I think West Coast could really, really challenge them at Marvel Stadium with some of the injuries they have. We then have on the Saturday night, Melbourne versus Geelong, in what was a very tough game, especially in the first half to watch. The second quarter didn't have a single goal, and there was 14 behinds in a row between the first, second, and third quarters. And so Melbourne, we know this has been a problem with them over the last few years, but to see it from Geelong as well is a bit different. Yes, it was raining and it wasn't great conditions, but it was a bit different from what we've seen from Geelong so far this year. They've been probably the best team in terms of kicking their shots and taking their chances when they need to, which obviously came back to rue them late in the game with Jeremy Cameron, which I'll talk about later. But for Melbourne, it was Max Gawn leading from the front. They, I think, kicked 6 behinds in a row, and then Max Gawn took a mark from about 52 out, rolled around and kicked it from 55 and absolutely launched the ball. and kicked a beautiful goal that really gave Melbourne the momentum. It was an absolute stand-up leadership moment, and it just shows how good of a player he is, and he's absolutely the front runner for the All-Australian ruck position at the moment. Aside from that, Caleb Windsor was really, really good for Melbourne, showing that he's one of the most consistent rookies in the class as of 8 rounds through this year. He's been really, really good. Kicked a goal after missing a set shot earlier in the match, which shows real courage, and it shows that he's going to be a great player in the future, able to take those moments in his hands. Lever was also really, really good, and I thought the game of Tom McDonald was very underrated. He was able to really quieten Jezza, he was able to go up the ground with him as well as come back, and he was really, really important to allow May to go on Hawkins and then Lever to be able to intercept. It really, really worked for them, and that's great. And then Bailey Fisher up forward, absolute great game. But that goal at the end to win it for Melbourne was awesome. It's pretty ironic given Jezza Cameron made a video during the week that how to do a dribble shot, and then Melbourne win the game off the dribble shot. And Jeremy Cameron misses 2 relatively simple set shots for him. He just missed the ball. Something we haven't seen from him. He became a human, finally, which is good for the others, not great for Geelong. But again, it was a very winnable game for Geelong, and they've only started 7-1. So what more can you really ask for them as a fan? I thought Ollie Henry was also really, really good. He played a pretty good game, kicked 3 goals straight, which is something other players struggled with. But also Tom Hawkins, talking about struggles, he hasn't kicked a goal in his last 4 games, and it looks like his age has sort of started to catch up on a little. I wouldn't be surprised if they rest him simply because he probably needs it. They've shown in the past that they are willing to rest their older players, and given how good they're going at the moment, it's not a bad thing to give someone like a Toby Conway or someone like what's the other name? O'Neill, I think, Shannon O'Neill. Give one of them a go alongside Cameron and Stanley, and just hope that they can, at least for a week, give Hawkins a break, essentially. But that's going to be the end of this video. If you enjoyed it, please hit the like button. It really helps push this video in the YouTube algorithm and grow my channel. Subscribe to this channel if you like this kind of content as well. Leave your thoughts on the big games from the round in the comments below. And thanks for watching.